Hi all, welcome to this new episode of my podcast, A Digital Tomorrow. Today, I'm hosting Ritesh Jain. Welcome to my episode.
Thank you, Will, and pleasure is all mine. So thank you for inviting me over here.
It's actually my pleasure. For those of you who may not know Ritesh yet, he's an entrepreneurial technology leader, board advisor with global experience across payments and banking, and the co-founder of Infynit after leaving HSBC as a CEO of Digital. In the past, he also led the future of payments for Visa and introduced Apple Pay, built a wealth management company as a founder CTO. And presently, he's also a member of a G20 initiative for financial inclusion, advisor to open banking in the European Union and Africa, Harvard Business Review, payment regulators and government bodies for the Initiative in Social and Financial Inclusion, and member of MIT Global Tech Panel. He's also a visiting lecturer to leading business schools, regular speaker and author, diversity and inclusion advocate. Past roles also include mentor to the UK Parliament Digital. So, as you can see, it's a very impressive biography, and well, I'm honored to have you here.
Thank you, Will, and thank you again for inviting me over here. I'm sure it is going to be a great conversation.
Well, I'm looking at your fantastic biography, which I just summarized. We can see that you have like more than 2 decades of global experience in digital technology, business transformation, operations. What were the main challenges that you encountered in your previous roles when it comes to this area of digitalization? I'm just talking about, these challenges that you can disclose. No, I'm not asking for anything like confidential, but for general ideas.
So thank you, Will. That's a very interesting question. The biggest challenge in my career or in my previous roles, what I've seen, there are multiple aspects. If I look into it from the people perspective or the technology perspective, the biggest challenge is around getting people together, getting them motivated enough. Because I always say it's all about people. If you can get them together, you'll see the magic happen. Technology is something that we can manage comparatively easier. On the other hand, the challenges related to the technology in banking, payments, and other sectors, it's around the legacy platforms and the services, and specifically more so in the banking and payments. And when it comes down to the payments, we are still relying on to quite legacy technology and platforms. And I was leading the future of payments for Visa in 2010 to 16. I've done various roles at Visa, and I can proudly say the payment space is not the same as it was 10 years back. It has moved quite significantly. So yes, the things are changing. The challenges that I've seen, we have overcome up to a certain extent, but there are still a greater challenges related to the regulatory compliances, clarity around the regulatory compliances, and the legacy platforms.
Mhm. Thank you for sharing. We're actually going to dig deep on payments later on because you are, of course, an expert on this area. But before moving to financial inclusion and payments, I wanted to ask you as well about Infynit. You are the co-founder of this new company, this project, whose goal is to humanize credit and credit cards. No, so could you please tell us a bit more about this new project and why do you think that credit needs to be humanized and how can we achieve this goal?
Sure. The credit cards are a great product. Right? In the financial services system, if we see, they are one of the best product developed. They provide great flexibility for the people in terms of making payments. And but at the same time, it comes with a lot of challenges as well. Right? On an average, if we talk about UK, which is the second largest credit card market in the world, UK has over 66 million credit cards in rotation, a population of 60 million people overall. Right? So on an average, people have 3 to 5 credit cards, and it's quite difficult for them to manage. But at the same time, it has a different challenge as well. In the developed countries, the disparity in the interest rates is significantly higher. So your personal loan is on an average 8%. Your credit cards between 24 to 32%, as well as when it comes down to the payday loans, that can go up to 1500%, and that's a matter of laugh. But that's reality. People heavily rely on the credit cards in the developed countries, and that's the culture. And that's the requirement of the time as well. So now, humanizing credit card means empowering people to use the credit card in a better way so
Mhm.
that they don't land up in paying unnecessary charges. In 2020, in UK alone, people have paid over 5.9 billion in interest rates as well as the late payment fee. And that's a significant amount of money.
Yes, it's huge actually, yes.
So that's why it's required to humanize credit and credit card experience in the UK. And that's why we exist.
I see. I see. Well, thank you for sharing this as well. It's an interesting area. And then I know there is one area to which, well, both of us have shown very interest these last few years, and that area is financial inclusion, because I know that we've discussed, well, this topic of camera in the past before, you know, and as you know, I'm currently co-leader of the Financial Inclusion Working Group at the Global Impact FinTech Forum. So, I mean, as you know, according to the World Bank's global fintech database, globally, 1.7 billion people do not have a bank account. And policymakers struggle to provide affordable, safe, and accessible financial services to this unbanked population. How do you think that we or governments could solve that? And I know it's a very difficult question. I know there is no magic answer to that, but what steps do you think that we could take to make this situation better?
The first and foremost, I apologize, but I have iterated this umpteen times in the past as well, and to the right forums as well, that the 1.7 billion, the numbers that we refer, that is not true anymore, right?
Okay,
We are a lot less than 1.7 billion as of today, right? Yes, the numbers are huge still, but the problem, we need to understand that it is not a financial services problem. It's majorly a public policy challenge. So what we really need to do is we need to bring the regulators, governments, and the financial institutions together. And I'm very hopeful with the fintech solutions which are coming up, and I can tell you umpteen solutions which are already existing, whether it's African market or the emerging economies, which are making a difference in the financial inclusion. And where I'm sitting today, I'm in Mumbai at this point of time while I'm speaking to you, and India is a very successful story for the financial inclusion globally. Whether you talk about the UID, the Unique Identification Program, to the free bank accounts to the people, and then later on in the payments, we will talk about the UPI. It is making a significant difference. Right? So how we can tackle this problem, we need to think strategically. But first and foremost, we need to understand and agree it is not just a financial services problem. It's a public policy challenge. We need to change our policies, and we need to be mindful about that as well.
I see.
And that's how we are going to tackle this problem.
I see. Well, I mean, that's a very interesting approach, no? Because to you, it is not so much just about financial services, no, but about public policies. So that's, of course, an interesting approach, and I concur with you. And I wanted to talk about some possible solutions. I mean, bearing in mind, of course, what you said about public policy, no, but still, I mean, some new key players in the market that might or might not help in that area. And in that regard, I want to talk about central bank digital currencies and cryptocurrencies, no? And I wanted to ask you, if you think that CBDCs can help promote financial inclusion, even though they are not a reality yet. They will be in some countries in the years to come, but still, do you think that they might help in that sense? And also, if you think that cryptocurrencies can also help in that regard.
See, when it comes down to the central bank digital currency, right, we need to understand that CBDCs can digitize the value chains. They can improve access to the digital financial services, and they can also help to enlarge the digital economy, right? And they are obviously increasing the efficiency of the digital payments, and they can be used offline where there is no internet coverage, right? But let's be realistic. There's a multifaceted challenge with the CBDCs as well. Whether they will be able to solve the problem like financial inclusion, I wouldn't completely agree to that. We have just discussed about the major problem of financial inclusion and the underserved and the unserved people globally. The biggest challenge comes down to the regulatory, the public policy, infrastructure, devices, because the CBDC needs a broader infrastructure as well. Yes, it is going to reduce the cost of the transaction, but we need to understand whether the CBDCs are going to be the interest or they are going to be non-interest bearing. We need to understand what is the distribution model of the CBDCs in that particular economy or the geography. So there are multiple factors that we need to consider before we can come to a conclusion whether CBDCs would be able to help in financial inclusion in a specific sector, or whether the CBDCs will have financial inclusion as a priority. Yes, they can help and support the financial inclusion, but whether it will be a priority for the central bank digital currencies, whether we will have enough infrastructure available for the common people or with them.
Mhm.
So the answer is still, unfortunately, it's not a very clear-cut answer, but yes, it has got the potential, but whether it will be a priority, whether it will have enough infrastructure and the support.
I fully agree, actually. I mean, actually, you're in charge of teaching the payments course at the CFT in London, and I'm in charge of teaching the ones on CBDCs. And something that I mentioned in that course, and whenever I give any webinar on this topic as well, is the fact or the idea that CBDCs per se are not just like one concept, but they are rather than more like an umbrella concept in the sense that each CBDC is going to be different. No? I mean, for example, digital yuan, which is about to be launched like in a few weeks from now, doesn't need to look at all like the future digital euro or the E naira in Nigeria. No? I mean, each central bank is going to design those differently according to their interests and public policies. So that means that I think as well that CBDCs not they do not necessarily need to help promote financial inclusion unless that specific central bank has decided to do so. And once again, we are back to your idea, no, of public policy. It's all about whether a certain government, a certain central bank decides to put their focus on that or not.
The biggest challenge I would like to add over here again, the biggest challenge in the financial inclusion is establishing the identity of a person, right? And the people's motivation to get and become part of the primary financial system. So we need to address that. We need to address whether we can establish the identity of the people. And that's what India did pretty well, an exceptional job for over 1.3 billion population country. India did well with the UID. And that's what we need to learn. Right? And, uh, and on the top of that, what is the motivation for people to open a bank account? Why they would like to get away from the cash and get into the financial system? What is the benefit for them? We need to establish that as well. And we have always seen and talked umpteen times about it. It's G2P, government to public payments. These are the basic means to start getting people into the primary financial system, opening, establishing their identity, providing the free financial services, the basic financial services, and getting them into the mainstream. Whether CBDC can address that, I don't think so.
I see. No, that's what about cryptocurrencies? Because we talked before, no, about CBDCs, but then there is this well, other area, no, the privately issued cryptocurrencies, and I know that I mean, aside from being what we could call like a commodity, it's been used, of course, to make payments in many places, to the point that, for example, El Salvador introduced Bitcoin as their legal tender in September, which was quite a bold move. But of course, we're talking about a country whose monetary policy before that was, well, tricky, you know. So I'm not saying that this example can be exported everywhere else, but as a general idea, do you think that cryptos might be useful in that area of trying to promote financial inclusion, or you don't think it might be helpful?
Cryptocurrencies, the whole idea about the cryptocurrencies was to store, retain, transfer the value, right? Whether the cryptocurrencies can address the financial inclusion challenge, I do not agree to that,
Mm-hmm.
right? The cryptocurrencies in its current form, it is quite volatile, right? And it is controlled completely private. So there is no control from the regulators, or not enough control from the regulators, let's put it that way. And it is not controlled by the monetary policy as well. And let's be realistic, when we talk about the cryptocurrencies today, at the first hand, you are exchanging your fiat with the cryptos. So in its current form, whether it can address the financial inclusion, definitely not. Because to have cryptos, you got to have means in terms of the digital devices, in terms of the your financial, you need to be part of the financial system, you need to have accounts and payments capability, then only you can have cryptos. In the future, whether it can change the course, yes, it has got the potential.
That's
And
very.
by the way, very interesting pickup regarding El Salvador, right? So it's a very interesting story, and it was excellent move, and I would say very bold move. The challenge with the El Salvador, like, the fundamental problem that El Salvador had, the 1/5 of the GDP, right? That is made up by the money coming from outside into El Salvador.
Mm-hmm.
People are sending money home, and they were paying significant cost for the transactions, right? And that's why it came up whether we can have Bitcoin as a legal tender. 70% of the people in El Salvador do not have a bank account, right? And Bitcoin enables quick, cheap payments across the borders, right? But again, I would say whether that was a right move, I wouldn't completely agree to that, because when you talk about the Bitcoin, A, it is not completely regulated. B, it is significantly volatile. So how can you have something as volatile as cryptocurrency as your legal tender? That
Well,
puts you in jeopardy.
well, I think yes. I mean, you're right. I think in the case of El Salvador, it's mainly because I mean, because of where they came from. No, I mean, no one thinks that that could be done like let's say in, I don't know, in Europe or in India or in many other places. In the case of El Salvador, I guess it was because I mean, they had a monetary policy before, but it was kind of a quite failed one, unfortunately. No, so I guess that kind of allowed them, no, to make this very bold move. But I don't think that situation, despite being, of course, an interesting case of study, can be like exported everywhere else exactly as it was done in El Salvador. No, I mean, it's of course an interesting case for us to observe, because seeing a country like doing that for the first time is, of course, an interesting thing to see and to watch closely. But I don't think it can be exported like directly like to many other places, at least in the way it is to now, no, today.
I completely agree to that. I don't think that it can be implemented in any of the economies, from small to larger economies at all.
Mm-hmm. No, and also the idea that you said before, no, I mean, the very at the very core of cryptocurrencies, we find this idea, no, of being decentralized. No, I mean, That is why they are the flagship of this decentralized finance DeFi movement. So making those into legal tender, of course, raises some questions. But as I said, I mean, El Salvador did that, so we need to keep an eye on that and see what happens.
Precisely.
And well, I mean, I think that to sum up this part, we could say that financial inclusion is, of course, a tricky area, no, and it depends, well, very much on public policy, not just on the financial services area. No, there is much more involved than just creating a new idea or CBDCs. No, it's much more profound than that, to put it simply. And moving forward, I want to talk, of course, about payments, which is the area that you are currently teaching at CFTE, and one area in which you have like a very extensive experience, because as I said before, you worked for Visa prior to HSBC. So of course you are a huge expert on this. And I wanted to ask you a few questions or ideas on this topic now. First of all, whether you think that digital payments and digital wallets will replace cash?
It's a very subjective question again. It's a matter of time.
Mm-hmm.
It's a matter of time and depends on the regions as well. So some regions will follow earlier than the others, because when it comes down to the digital payments, it has got its fundamental challenge as well, again related to the infrastructure, devices, people's capability, and the cash innovation in the economies, right? So if you consider in the emerging and Asian market, it's quite heavily innovation, but on very surprising, India's digital payments in terms of the numbers is the largest in the world, right? So the digital payment adoption in India has grown exponentially in the last couple of years, and thanks to UPI, the Unified Payment Interface, right? But whether digital payments will replace cash completely, even in India, I don't see that's happening in a near future, and not even in a decade, if I'm being completely realistic. Yes, I see the other economies like UK, Sweden, and few other countries which will follow earlier than the other economies for the broader adoption of the digital payments. But whether it will completely replace cash, that's a question. Cash will exist because we still have got unserved, underserved, unbanked people, even in the developed economies. UK has over 2 million people who are unbanked. And similarly, if you consider US has got a huge population which is unbanked. So it's not unbanked, or is not just a problem for emerging economies or Asia or African story. It's existing everywhere. So it's a matter of time for the digital payments taking over the cash completely or replacing the cash. So adoption, I completely agree. Yes, we are seeing the exponential growth in the adoption, but replacing cash, that is at a distance.
Mm-hmm. I see. You mentioned before this idea of UPI in India, and you actually mentioned that before as well. So for all those listeners who are not from India, could you please summarize briefly these UPI, UAD ideas? Because it sounds, of course, like a very interesting idea, and I know it's been successful. You mentioned that before as well. So if you could like maybe please give us some more thoughts on that.
Sure. So the unified payment infrastructure is conceptualized by NPCI, which is the National Payment Council of India. I've been part of the in the consulting for UPI in its formation in the early days. So it's a payment infrastructure which is developed for India. It's a national payment infrastructure, and where the banks are interconnected. So that has driven the growth in the fintech sector in India, as well as the digital payment adoption in India. So the people can make the digital payments at their fingertips, and the banks can connect their payment infrastructure with the UPI. and that is the central payment infrastructure.
Mm-hmm. I see. I see.
So it's you can, in a nutshell, for layman terms, it's a digital payment infrastructure of India, where the banks are interconnected.
Well, thank you for sharing. It sounds very interesting, and I wanted, of course, for you to give some more thoughts on this, no, just in case, because I know that many of our listeners are
I'm
not from
sure we can
India.
have
So
when we have a next session or some time, I can talk more in detail about the UPI, what it is and what it does. But as you would imagine, UPI led the digital payment adoption in India, and all the growth that you're seeing, especially into the fintech and the payments landscape is in India. It's all due to the unified payment interface. It's a UPI. It's because of that. And that is one of the major factor.
now, of course, I mean, looking forward to discussing this in more detail with you, like in any of our next podcasts. But I guess that for now, the idea is clear for all of our listeners. Now, I wanted to ask you as well about payments, but especially about the new technologies that can be applied to this payments area, such as, for example, what do you think that IoT can mean to the payment industry, or artificial intelligence and machine learning?
So in payments, we have been utilizing the latest technology for the longest time. I recall in 2010 when we were building up the real-time scoring system, RTS for Visa, that was giving us for each transaction, it was giving the real-time scoring, and based on that, it was sent to the authorization. So we are utilizing the various technologies for the longest time. The artificial intelligence, machine learning, the typical use case that everybody will talk about is the frauds, and that's what we all know. And there are umpteen other use cases as well. Similarly, when we talk about the IoT, it's very interesting because we are looking into the voice commerce. We are looking into the IoT enabled payments. You can make payments using anything. Your Nowadays, your car, your fridge, your washing machine, any device could be payment enabled, right? And you're utilizing your various devices, your watches, your even rings. So there are various devices, and that is all due to the IoT. So and it's all interconnected payments and interconnected devices, and it has got a great future. We are already seeing the huge adoption in the voice commerce, where people are utilizing their voice to make payments, and there are umpteen alternate payment methods, right? So there's a, and not only about artificial intelligence, machine learning, and IoT, but we are seeing the adoption of the cloud. We are looking into the payment as a service, or where the managing payments for an organization, whether it's a regional bank or large enterprise, it is a painful task. It is a humongous task, and it needs quite a lot of people, infrastructure. Now the large organizations or the enterprises, service providers, they're providing payment infrastructure as a service. So we are already seeing the huge adoption in the cloud landscape. So yes, the payment is always at the forefront. They are adopting the latest and emerging technology. And that's why I always say, like, payment, if you want to see an innovation, go and look into payments.
Yes. Well, I mean, it's of course an interesting industry. So talking about innovations and payments, I wanted to get back to the cryptocurrencies. Again, we spoke about cryptos and financial inclusion. And now I wanted to ask you whether you think that cryptos will play an important role in the future of payments, or especially of payment companies and virtual banks. And I mean, or in other words, I mean, do you think it's going to become like more and more common to see more payment companies, virtual banks, etc., allowing their customers to buy and sell cryptos, deposit, withdraw, invest, exchange with fiat, and send to other people? Do you think that this trend is going to continue?
Yes, this will continue. The reason is because we are seeing a huge adoption of the cryptocurrencies by the retail customers, including the enterprise and the commercial customers as well. But in the retail environment, we are seeing a huge adoption. If I can just give you the numbers, like in India, between April 2020 to May 2021, we have seen a 7-time growth, 7 times in the adoption of cryptocurrency users, right? And the
Huge.
valuation as well, from 900 odd billions to it has gone close to 7 billion in terms of the investments into the cryptocurrencies. So just that, and India is one of the largest leading in the cryptocurrency adoption by the retail investors. There are over 15 million investors who have invested money in the cryptocurrencies, right? And whether it is right or wrong, time will tell. Whether it is a FOMO, yes, up to a certain extent, it feels like a FOMO. Uh, so the financial institutions or the fintechs or anybody else who are providing services to the retail investors or the retail customers, they have to provide the required services, right? If the customer is demanding it, they have to serve it. And similarly, we are seeing the adoption, whether it's a bank or some of the fintechs or some of the neobanks or the digital banks, they're already offering the services, including some of the leading banks as well. They started getting into the landscape of the cryptocurrencies, including the payment companies. They have got huge projects running around the cryptocurrencies and the adoption of cryptocurrencies, and the cards distribution which are supporting cryptocurrencies as well. So yes, I do not see it stopping anytime soon. It is continued to grow.
Mhm. No, it makes sense. Well, thanks for sharing this, and we are coming to an end, but not yet, but because before wrapping this up, I would like to ask you, like, well, some predictions for this year, now that 2021 has already been left behind and we are entering into 2022. I wanted to ask you, like, any predictions for this year, like, that you want to share with us on the, like, payments industry, or maybe in general in the whole fintech industry, anything relevant that you think may happen this year, because we come from two very fascinating years, 2021 and 2020 were like very fascinating in the fintech area. So is there like anything you think that will happen that we need to bear in mind?
Digital payments adoption continue to grow exponentially. Buy now, pay later, the adoption is growing at a rapid pace. We are going to see some hurdles because of the regulatory and the compliances which are around the corner, because we have already seen quite a bit of setback into the buy now, pay later landscape. So we got to be wary about the buy now, pay later as well, but the adoption is tremendous. We are going to see the growth in the cryptocurrencies adoption and the regulations around the cryptocurrencies, and especially the method of payments, like huge adoption in the voice commerce that is going to grow, and the connected payments. So there's a huge list if I can talk about, because the transformation happening in all the areas. If you talk about the cross-border payments, there is a huge work going on to the cross-border payments. ISO 20022 around the corner. There's a lot of transformation happening around across the globe for ISO 20022 adoption. So yeah, there are umpteen initiatives. Real-time payments, that's already happening in a majority part of the world. US is already there and coming up with their own UPI-like infrastructure, and for the real-time payments. P27 in Nordics, that is geared up. It is slowed down a bit, but I'm pretty sure we are going to see good success in 2022. So yeah, there are quite a lot of global initiatives which are shaping up, and we are going to see quite a lot of success in 2022.
Well, they all sound fascinating. Thank you for sharing those with us. And even though I would like to continue this discussion for much longer, we are running out of time. So I would like to thank you, Ritesh, for coming to my show, to my podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure to be able to speak with you for this for over half an hour, and I hope I can host you soon, sometime later this year, because it's been a pleasure to learn so much from you on financial inclusion, payments, and all, and in general on the area of fintech.
Thank you, Will, and pleasure is all mine. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. And well, to all my listeners, dear friends, stay tuned for the next episodes. Thank you. Bye.